Hello, guys, and welcome to the first and most probably only summer series video of this summer. Although I'm planning to do one more video, but maybe it's not exactly part of the summer series. We'll see next week. But anyway, after a slightly longer than usual break that I took from fantasy hockey, I'm back now, and we have basically plenty of things to do, like getting up to speed for the new season. But before we do, we do our usual trip to 6 years back and look at the 2019 UDL prospect draft and how we did back then and how have those prospects done since then. And without further ado, we take a look at the list. I will be posting the full list to the Google spreadsheet with the current stats of the draftees, so you can take a look. But this was the Jack Hughes draft, basically 2019, and also it was the other pretty notable thing was that it was the draft year of the national development US national development program, that they had, like, I think uh, um, 8 prospects drafted out of this team in the first round. And if we talk about what was notable for our draft, it was the first time we had the 6th round draft. So after the inaugural prospect draft was 10 rounds, then we had 5, and this is the first year when we went up to 6, where we stand still. So basically, this was the first year that we went from 5 to 6 rounds, and we'll see how it impacted some of the results. And this is what we look next. So the picture that I've tried to put together for each of the drafts, so with to compare. And here we see that basically this is the draft in so far that has had the highest number of non-NHL players. So plenty of misses, but in terms of finding good quality players, it was slightly better than the 2018 one. But I think both these years are pretty poor compared to the previous drafts. So basically, not a great year. But what we see here on the next picture is that the 6th round that we added. Basically, it reaffirms, or at least this draft reaffirms, the more or less the strength or the stats that the third to fifth, or and now from this year to the 6th round, the probability of finding NHL players is pretty similar. So basically, after the first round, there is a steep drop, then less of a drop between the second and the third, and then it's pretty much a crapshoot after that. But this graph is pretty, especially the blue part is a bit strange, how we managed to do a lot better in the 5th round compared to the fourth, especially in terms of games played, which means that we found more NHL relevant players. But the points per game, which is the dotted orange line, is pretty consistent from the second to the 6th round. So if you hit on a player, it's still produced. So you cannot say that players in the 3rd round or the fourth were a lot weaker than the seconds. On average, of course, there are. This is the beauty of the average, is that it basically paints over the ugly parts and cuts off the top. Anyway, the last picture here is something compared to where are they now. So basically, it has been always around half of, or maybe a little bit more than half, are in the NHL. But compared to the previous years, I see a trend that significantly less players from that draft class are currently playing in Europe. I don't know if this has anything to do with maybe hesitance to go to the KHL, because this was the main landing spot for people who cannot crack the NHL, and now more of them are staying in the AHL ECHL system compared to previously. But we can observe it if it's a trend over the next seasons too. And now we go into the top 10s. The first top 10 is the best player, so basically the top players from the draft class based on their stats. So if we have to do a redraft, it could go something like this. So naturally, I've intentionally put Moritz Seider on the top spot, although it's arguably Jack Hughes still is the top player. But I just wanted to give a note to Seider and how valuable he is in our format. It's such defensemen that fill the whole score sheet are very, very nice to have and very hard to get. And here it was actually, this was the first draft where the Ramparts were managed by Vince. So this was one of his first picks, and it was a good one. But as you can see, the black names here are ones that are no longer with their drafting team, and the greens are those who are still with their drafting team. So both Seider and Hughes were traded by their respective drafting teams, which is pretty unusual in these revisits. Normally, the top picks are more or less kept. But what other the other things to note here is how prevalent the Brooklyn Aces are here, and Mike has held on to all three of his good selections in this draft. And Eagle Eyed viewers have already noticed that Stuart Skinner is the 120th overall pick, which means the last in this draft class. So Mr. Irrelevant. And here's the trivia question of the day. So speaking of Mr. Irrelevant, and Stuart Skinner is definitely the best Mr. Irrelevant that we've had so far. He's nowhere close to that successful players being drafted last. But who is the only player who has been drafted last twice? Oh, the answer you can guess, and I'll give you the answer at the end of the video. And just a last note on this top 10 is that basically I think the top 2, then the 3, 4, 5, 6 are basically close between each other. So the top 2 are in one tier, and then Bodie and Caulfield the next, Harley and Byram next, and then from 7 to 10 it's totally, you can order them however. I think they're very close between Zegras and Cousins, and even a couple of players that just fell below the top 10 cutoff. I think it's a pretty good top 10 in terms of quality, but I think we will see that it drops off pretty quickly after that. And the next are the best value picks, which are the best picks outside of the top 2 rounds, so from 3rd round and later. And of course, we again find Skinner and Aiden Hill here, as they were naturally present on the top 10 overall selections and were drafted later. But I think the one here I want to give a shout out is Pospisil, so I put it in 3rd. And he's no longer with the Jackalopes. He's currently with the Red Bull team and the Brat. And he's not much of a scorer, but he's an absolute monster in the peripherals. And I think he's got a decent scoring touch as well. So he can be one of those few really good forwards, like multi-cat forwards. And the other players here are pretty good, like Shane Pinto in the 6th round is pretty good selection. Lecombe could turn out to be a gem for Brad. He still owns him, so he's drafted, and one as the team was still called Linköping, but now with the Red Bull team. And Geeky, if he manages to repeat his performance from last season, could climb up definitely on this in this table if we do another ranking in a couple of seasons. So, and Gavrikov and Mikheyev have been serviceable, but you see that the drop off here is pretty significant after the first 7 or 8. Like Gavrikov and Mikheyev, I wouldn't call them like very great players for fantasy, but still serviceable and decent picks for where they were selected. And next, I think is the more I don't know controversial one, the top 10 busts, and we there was quite a lot of selection in this. There were quite a few players in the top 2 rounds that uh, either never made it or never made it to their high advanced billing. And here is how I've ordered them in the top 10. Oh, the top 3 are pretty like big names, maybe Krebs not as much. And I didn't put Kako in the top spot because he's managed to become basically an average or slightly below average player for our format. And like based on the stats of career years or career stats I've done, and how relevant players are. So to be relevant for a forward, he must produce like half a point per game, and Kako is slightly below that. But for being selected number 2 overall, I would say that he's definitely one of the bigger misses of this draft, along with Turcotte, who basically just made it to the NHL and in very limited capacity. And below you see like Wolfsburg with 3 selections in the top 10, especially the Albin Gru, who was mid second round, who never made it to the NHL. Oliver Kaski also didn't make it, but he was like swinging like a boom or bust. He came over late. I think he was one of the older selections in the draft. I think 24 or something like that. And he was like a late Euro import that was supposed to contribute right away, but he never actually did, and went back to Europe like very quickly after. So there were like plenty of misses, like I said in this draft. You can take a look if you want to see in the spreadsheet with the all with all selections. And now the overall table that like ranks the teams based on how well their draft is produced, and we have the, so to say, the total. And no surprise that the Aces are the top team for me. I think they had an amazing draft. Also quite impressive is that out of their 6 selections, 5 of them are still on their team, which is pretty high retention percentage. And to be able to draft a really good forward defenseman and a goalie in a single draft. I don't know if was it the Dallas Stars that selected Heiskanen, Robertson, and Oettinger in the same draft, or or those weren't in the same, but maybe in consecutive drafts. But anyway, if you manage to select the backbone of your team in a single draft, it's every time it's like impressive. And looking at the second and third place, the Ice Dice and the Ramparts, they were a lot more polarizing in terms of selections. You can see both their classes here. Basically, Mark's class was heavily carried by Jack Hughes and the late selection of Aiden Hill. And other than that, it's a pretty mixed bag with a couple of big misses. But his selections were not as early. The Ramparts had a very, very early, like the average draft position of their 5 selections, as you see here, is 17.8. So basically, they were done by the like mid of the second round. And apart from Turcotte, who really didn't pan out, the other selections were pretty solid. Like Bemstrom is now likely going back to Europe, but still he has had some pretty decent seasons. But the real star of the show here is the Grizzly Adams team. So, so James managed to he interestingly enough he had the second earliest average draft selection after the Rampart. So he had early picks, 5 picks within the first 2 rounds. Basically, if you look at the positions, he had 5 second-round selections, but he didn't manage to. So the only NHLer he got was Hoglander, and even Hoglander is pretty fringe in terms of contribution to our league. And compared to when I was doing that, I looked at the last year's and the revisit of the 2018 draft, where the Wolfsburg team was the top placed in this same ranking. So James went from managing the treacherous 2018 draft very well to failing spectacularly in the 2019. But I think this is how things go, especially in not so great drafts. But anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching. But before we go, I won't forget to give you the answer of the trivia question. And the only player who has been drafted last on two occasions is Liam Kirk, and both those times were by the Jackalopes. So anytime I can mention Liam Kirk, I will take the opportunity, since he's the only player drafted out of the actual Sheffield Steelers team. So you see him here donning the Steelers covers. Anyway, that's it. That's all. And looking forward to seeing you all around the chat and getting stuff really going, as we are almost in September, and that means that it's time for the auction and everything that goes along with it. So see you around, and bye bye.